Good evening, everyone. We'll probably start. I think there's enough time. I just need somebody to take a co-host from me, just in case there is a drop in signal. I know Lal Paji is here. Lal Paji, let me try to give you the co-host if that is fine. And anybody else wants a co-host, they can just raise their hand, and I can send you the co-host. Uh, if we can get two co-hosts, I think that'll be great. Okay, while we are at it, I hope everybody can hear me. Let me know if my voice is not clear because, okay, great. So I am getting the thumbs up. We'll do the space in English because, and I'll probably do a Punjabi version later on. But I want to do it in English so that all my patriots, fellow patriots in Canada and US can actually, watch this and kind of understand the topic that is under discussion. Uh, Today we are going to talk about India's undeclared war with Canada and US. You can use the term West as well. If you want to include the all Five Eye nations. Actually, they are kind of under threat, and that has been kind of being observed for last 2 years. The role that the Indian regime has been playing in instilling violence and division and harming Canadians and Americans and British and Australian citizens. These are very, very serious concerns. They have been lately, been commented upon extensively by the mainstream media in U.S., Canada, you name any country, from Washington Post to New York Times to everybody else. Um, they have all commented on it. And while we are at it, I'll just kind of before I go further, like I'll request if somebody else can send a request and become a co-host. That'll be great. Okay. So, but recently today there was another very, very serious incident which happened. Um, in what exactly happened was that there are a lot of people, businesses in Edmonton, Alberta, that have been targeted through arson, and that kind of triggered me that hey, this thing is getting really serious. So we need to really talk about it and educate our citizens about what's going on. While we are at it, Lal Paji, can you mute your mic? You keep going on mute. Yeah. Okay. So I think to understand what's going on, there are things happening at multiple level, and we need to kind of understand all of it. So many of you have probably read one article of India trying to murder a Sikh activist here, or in US or in Canada. Some of you might have heard something else, but I don't think there has been a good job done till now by any of the mainstream media in putting the entire picture of what's going on. So this effort is to actually give you an entire picture of all the things that India has been doing in terms of harming US, Canadian, British, and Australian interests. So we'll talk about it. The topic, as I said, is India's undeclared war with the West, and hopefully, by the time I end this presentation, you guys will be more wiser and understand why I am making this very, very. It might sound a provocative statement because India was seen as a friend not too long ago, but suddenly the image has changed from a friend to a foe. So I want to kind of go through all the facts and kind of give you a high level 40,000 feet view, if not a deeper view of what has caused this sudden change in our posture towards India. So to understand that, we first have to understand some bit of um, history of India's relationship with West, and what has been India's role with US and Canada in various multilateral forums, whether it's WTO, United Nations, etc., etc. Not many of you might know that which is the country which has voted the most against US in United Nations, and the number two is not even close. Okay, the country which has voted the most against United States in UN is India. There is no country which comes close to the number one. So just to give you context, that yes, India was kind of seen as a very friendly country, but that is a very very recent phenomena of last 2 decades. From 1947, by the time the UN came into being, till 1992, that was the dismembering of USSR. India was squarely and firmly a Russian client state, or a USS Soviet client state. Russia came into existence later. So, due to that, India, always used to take very inimical positions against US and Western interest. So that changed to some degree, in the last 2 decades, but not a whole lot. Still, India was heavily against, anything which comes from the Western bloc. Another thing that we saw was, when the all of us were trying to help Ukraine ward off, this illegal and I would say fascist invasion by Putin. Which country kind of supported Russia through and through and made sure that all the sanctions against Russia do not work at all? It was India. India actually disregarded all the sanctions on buying petroleum, etc., from Russia and went ahead and basically bought every single drop of oil that Russia was purchasing, basically nullifying all the sanctions we had put in place, all this inflation we took on our budget, where we had to pay all this excessive cost for the petrol and gas, as well as the Europeans had even way rougher winter. India basically made money out of it because they got cheap oil, and Russia was happy with it because they were getting funding for the war effort. So, a very negative role India played in that war effort, and it's still going on as we talk. India's role in G20 has also been very, very questionable in terms of supporting our agenda in of cornering Russia or other countries and kind of bringing them in line with the the world where things run as per set rules. Especially India's constant propping of a Russian agenda and Chinese agenda in G20 has been a source of problem. Like the latest G20 summit that happened in India, India was the chairman of that summit. They didn't allow Biden and Trudeau to even hold a press conference, and not even a press conference with our like American press corps. That was the level of they were worried that Biden will say something which is going to upset the Russians because there is war going on in Russia. So India's role in G20 has been primarily of being a Russian puppet, to say the least. India is also very, very friendly with Iran and one of the major purchasers of oil from Iran. If India was not there, Iran would have tough time being even a scalable, sustainable, economically viable entity. Very few people know that. These are allegations. Now, I have read reports that Iran's nuclear proliferation. There's decent amount of support from India. India's NSA was constantly visits Iran, and there was a very urgent visit that happened like a couple of weeks back, and there's been speculation that actually it was related to India providing some emergency uranium, blah blah blah, plutonium for Iran going nuclear very soon. So this is more in the space of speculation, but as they say, there is no smoke if there is no fire. India has been constantly trying, and they are very vocal about it, about challenging the dominance of the dollar in world trade. They are actually the first country which moved to purchasing gas using a non-dollar currency. Uh, all through the Ukrainian crisis, the Indians purchased gas using currencies which was non-dollar denominated. They are the prime champions of challenging the dollar dominance, and they constantly talk about coming up with this currency, that currency, which is going to take off the dollar preeminence. India has also played a great role. It is told in expanding BRICS, which is basically a counter to G20. And the recent kind of addition of five more members into BRICS, it is said India had a role to play in it. Okay. Lastly, um, India, or second lastly, if you, and maybe these 2 points are linked. The Indian mindset, if you read and listen to all Indian major strategic analysts, um, they look at Indian continent itself as some kind of one civilization, which is factually not correct. India is a continent with multiple civilizations, but the way the Indian regime is structured is that the power there is held by a casteist elite, which prominently come from one particular tribe called Brahmins, which are basically the originators of the caste system in India, and they basically have a civilizational narrative, and they see India as the civilizational state, they call it, and which is kind of Hindu civilizational state, which in their worldview is in conflict with Muslim civilization and Islamic civilization and Chinese civilization, and their end goal is to basically fight them and conquer them. So while in our day-to-day work, when we meet fellow Indians, they look very friendly, and they are friendly and very benign citizens. When you probe a bit into their ideology, not all of them, but the ones who are nationalistic and who believe in this idea of the Indian civilization, you will see that they have deep, deep hatred for Western civilization because it's a competing model. So while they will come here, their mindset, and this is, I'm talking about diaspora, but even their entire security, national security structure, from top, from the prime minister right to bottom, has bought onto this narrative that India is a civilization which is in a perennial conflict with the Western civilization, which they call it a Christian civilization, and Islamic civilization, and Chinese civilization. So it is with that view that they kind of look at West as an enemy rather than as a friend. So it is very important, and you guys can go and watch some of these videos. Actually, I had published a couple of videos where I had translated, because they generally speak in Hindi when they talk about these things. They don't want things to kind of West to understand things too easily or what's going on here. But you can see a very deep-seated hatred, and that hatred is very similar to, if you hear some of these very core like ISIS guys who have this idea of an Islamic ummah, and which is going to rule the entire world. It is basically the same philosophy. The only difference is you can change the word from Islamic to Hindu, but that's it. But their goal first is to take over the entire continent from Kabul till Kanyakumari. They call it Akhand Bharat, but they don't want to stop at there. Yeah.
Honey, let me add something. It didn't happen like 40, 50, 60 years ago. It just happened in last 15, 20 years ago. All those people are saying this are dead.
Yeah. Lalpani, I'll finish this. We'll open it up for questions.
It's been changing. Let me correct it. It's
Yeah.
not like that. They were last, but they've been now lately army has been being fed. Let me correct it. That's all. You can continue speaking now. Thank you.
Got it. Yeah. No, this is a lengthy presentation. This is supposed to be 1 hour. Almost we'll be spending 1 hour through these PPTs. There's a lot more data, and then we'll discuss it. And I encourage you guys to note down the points that you think are incorrect or you agree or disagree with. When we open it up for discussion, we'll kind of pick up on all of these. Okay. And okay, so let's move on. So we have to understand this kind of why this kind of why is India kind of a war-like state with West? What is the need? Like for India, for Indians per se, it should be a win-win situation. to have a beneficial economic relationship with the West, especially given how poor that subcontinent is. But as I said, it is not quote unquote a rational state in that sense. It's a state where the elite have a civilizational kind of a narrative. So it's many a times does not behave, in a way when you can expect a rational state to behave in. Okay, so let's move on. So what has been going on? Now I'll kind of present the data kind of which tells you, how India has been at war. So I'll kind of present you evidence after evidence, and then you guys can make up your mind if India is actually in a state of war with the West or not. It is an undeclared war, but like the very first thing is that India is the number one country which is the source of transnational repression of religious minorities which have escaped India and are today living in US. You don't have to believe me. You have to pull out the report after report that have been written by USCIRF, which is United States Commission on International Religious Freedoms, and this is a fairly comprehensive kind of a study that is done every year, and USCIRF submits a report and kind of recommends the president to kind of put countries in they have two levels. They put them in countries of particular concern, and then the next level is sanctions. Since 2020, they have been recommending that India needs to be made a country of particular concern. But as politics kind of always took over, the president kind of ignored that, and I'm told that that is probably going to change very soon. So we have to kind of understand this idea of transnational. Now, the transnational repression, before we further, I'll tell you the way it is done is multiple ways. And this is where China is also a great big player. What the country will do is that they will target the diaspora here, like the Indian diaspora, specifically the Sikh diaspora, the religious minority. And they will use things like, they will plant their agents within the religious institute, like the Sikh gurdwaras today are infested with Indian spies who will then, some of them will be gangsters or criminals. They will fund them, and then they will use them to threaten anybody who says anything critical of the Indian government. They will also try to take control of the religious institutions of minorities in West. Like it is open secret in the Sikh circle that almost all major gurdwaras of Sikhs in India are actually controlled by Indian government through their cronies and their puppets that they have installed here. And then they will also, conduct, they'll deny them visas, use mobility controls, threaten their family members in India, put them under, torture, and kind of because most of these people who come and immigrated, they still have their family back in India. So what they will do is they'll pick up somebody's father, kind of, torture him, and then blackmail this person who is now a US citizen to basically act as a double agent of India in US. And then you can use them to do whatever that you want them to do. And this has been ongoing. This is nothing new. This has been kind of something kind of simmering under the surface. I believe our agencies, everybody knew it, but something that we didn't take notice of until recently. And we'll go to what made everybody wake up to this threat. So this is what made everybody kind of wake up from their slumber. This is what woke up even the public from its slumber, which is the transnational terrorism, or somebody use the word that India has been operating death squads globally across all the Five Eyes nations, which is Canada, which is UK, which is America, which is Australia. And there have been multiple citizens of Canada, US, Britain, who have been killed directly by Indian death squads or operatives of Indian intelligence. The most recent one and the most public one, which came into knowledge, which probably most of you guys know, is that now there is an indictment filed in a court in New York, wherein an Indian intelligence officer has been named, Indian national, which is a criminal drug trafficker who has been named. Then their evidence has been presented and they have been indicted that they have been running this program sitting while that Indian intelligence officer is serving, very, very senior Indian intelligence officer who has been running this program sitting in India. And that actually, and the indictment is there with all the evidence. You guys can go and look at it, how they were planning. The Indian intelligence was planning to kill almost 3 to 6 two to three Americans every month. So you can talk about 36 assassinations in a year, and it's a damning, indictment where all the evidence is there. They have video evidence, they have evidence of money being exchanged, being paid to this guy, and and basically that, like, you can imagine, like, and almost all of those 36 are expatriate Sikhs. Sikhs are a minority, religious minority in India, which have been constantly kind of demanding a right to self-determination within the Indian subcontinent. And they're in big numbers. They are in US because when they were persecuted big time 2 decades back, many of them sought asylum in US, and they are in big numbers in Canada as well and in UK as well. So, and they are they have been the source of this, global assassination program. And there are reports after reports now on this. You can read Washington Post, New York Times. There's a very prominent Sikh who was assassinated in Canada. His name is Hardeep Singh Nijjar, again traced back to India. The Canadian Prime Minister stood up in the Parliament, that is Justin Trudeau. I am no big fan of Justin Trudeau, but there is one thing at least he did right, was to stand up for his country and call out a hostile country which is now sending death squads to Canada to kill Canadian citizens. And there have been similar deaths in UK. There have actually multiple deaths in Pakistan, but we won't talk about it. Pakistan is a hostile nation to India, so they do this all the time. But this apparently is a new thing. I don't remember any time when, quote unquote, a friendly country, leave alone a friendly country, even North Korea does not operate death squads in America for North Korean dissidents, or even if they have operated, they have not been successful till now. The maximum we have heard is like Chinese operating some kind of police stations, which we keep hearing about, but we never get any evidence of. But but that's the maximum. But the Indian government has gone way, way beyond it. I'll tell you the names. You guys can go to New York Times, whichever paper. Just type Hardeep Singh Nijjar. You will find all the evidence on how he was assassinated. He was assassinated very tragically, right outside the Sikh place of worship, the Gurdwara which he headed, attacked by six assassins. 50 bullets were pumped into his body on the Father's Day when he was leaving the Gurdwara to go back to his home to have dinner with his two sons. So a very tragic story. And he was not just a Sikh hero, he was a Canadian hero, well known locally, loved locally for all the community work he did in terms of the fires, in time of, giving help to anybody who is any natural calamity that happened in BC area, which have been a plenty recently, the floods, the fires. Even when the Afghani refugees came in, he was a big part of the support that was provided. His Gurdwara provided free meals, actually even right now provides free meals every single day to anybody from any religion, any caste, any culture. Anybody who is homeless can go and have food in his Gurdwara. So when that guy was killed, it was also a big flag. And Justin Trudeau clearly said that he has evidence, Canadians have evidence, that it was directed by the Indian government. And Indian government's main demand was that the Sikhs in diaspora, they constantly criticize the Indian government, and they keep running this they nowadays there's a very famous referendum movement that is the Sikhs are running. They are conducting a peaceful, non-binding referendum, which is in the eyes or crosshairs of the Indian regime, because they don't want any such demand to even be talked about anywhere in the world. So that I've only taken a couple of assassinations that have happened. You guys can Google it and find out more. There's like enough data available on these global assassination programs of India, especially targeting Americans and Canadians. Okay, so it is not just that India has been running this assassination program, or using tactics like threatening people's family members back home, or torturing them, or confiscating properties of American citizens which they have back in their home country in India. The Indian government today is considered, and there are multiple US reports as well on this, is considered the biggest source of disinformation on World Wide Web. What Indian government has, and it is not talked about enough, but it is an open secret now. What Indian government has done, not even Russia and China has achieved today. And I will talk you through what all they have done and how they have vitiated that entire ecosystem of what the new digital media that we have. Um, there is this very great article you can read from Washington Post, where there is this, they talk about this vast digital campaign by Hindu nationalists to inflame India, and it's not just inflame India now; it is now to inflame the whole world. And in this article, I think they talk about more than 100,000 people that had been hired by this government just to spread disinformation, act as trolls, amplify disinformation that they want to go out in the world. And many of you who are listening probably have first-hand experience of the Indian trolls. There is nobody left today on the worldwide media who doesn't know what an Indian troll means, because one way or the other you will come in their crosshairs. They're everywhere. But anyways, let's look at how they have done it. Okay. I'll give you a couple of examples. But before one, and I'll take you one of, like, take Apple at a time. Apple, this is a very nice article by Washington Post, how Apple was blackmailed, threatened with their executives in India were threatened with imprisonment. But the mistake Apple did was the Indian government has bought a software called Pegasus, which can actually hack Apple iPhone you without even giving you any sending you any software. It can just give you a missed call, and then the software can enter and can hack your phone. And so it's a very very rare software, and by it's made by an Israeli company, and the contract says that it will only be sold to governments, and they can only use it for purpose of targeting terrorists, or let's say human traffickers. There are very stringent conditions on the use of that software by any government, but the Indian government has been caught using that software left, right, and center. They don't have a single terrorist on the list. There have been many investigation reports where they have leaked the people that the Indian government has targeted. So they have targeted, activists, social workers, journalists, politicians, bankers. Okay, and you name them. Anybody from the minority community who is any kind of leader of prominence, his or her phone has been hacked by the Indian government using that software. So if you, and all these reports which came out always had Indian government being the largest abuser of this software. So obviously Apple was monitoring. Apple had an internal program of monitoring which who is doing what. And once they figured it out, they were like alarmed. And as a responsible company, and Apple is a responsible company, I have to say, it basically sent out a warning to all those users who were targeted, telling them that, hey, it seems that your phone might have been targeted for hacking. So here are a couple of steps you can take, like put your phone in lockdown mode, etc. And just that plain warning, when it went out, it the Indian government raised a hue and cry. They called the head of the Apple in India and threatened him that he'll be put in prison. And then until and unless he withdraws that warning. And this is, you can read this article. It's a very in-depth article on what they did. Okay. And then, like the poor guy, he basically under threat, he eventually ended up, saying, okay, I can't withdraw it. And he got stuck between the Apple office in California and the Indian government. And he eventually, as ended up setting, and he was forced to send another advisory to all those people who got the first advisory. And that advisory had to say that, oh, our first advisory was probably a mistake and sent out due to some technical error. He was forced to send that. This is what this article kind of exposes. And Indian government didn't stop at it. Once they got it, they even called the security head of Apple, traveled to India in November this year. They actually even threatened him with imprisonment, that if he does not, if next time this happens, then they'll have to basically pay a price for it. And so that is the extent to which Indian government went to kind of hack Apple phones and kind of make sure that Apple does not react or does not make any countermeasures to stop that hacking. Another, you guys can read the article in your free time. Facebook, there are article after article which are telling how Facebook was pressurized and actually censored all the speech, any speech you could put on Facebook against the Indian government, the Facebook will take it off. Now it largely went unnoticed because The speech that was being muffled was of the religious minorities like Sikhs and Muslims and Christians, and it didn't impact our Western worldview in that major degree. So it kept happening, but at the scale of it was huge. And in fact, the Facebook office in India today has people who are actually Indian government employees, and I'll talk about it. That there was actually a whistleblower who came out with all this information, and there was a Senate hearing, and in that Senate hearing there was also another kind of a closed door hearing. But what we know from the public portion, the non-redacted portion of that whistleblower report, I will talk about it after a couple of more slides. It is damning, especially with relation to Twitter. Okay, Netflix and Amazon were also threatened with prison, and they also had to fall in line with the Indian government. In fact, the Amazon Prime Video head of India today, her passport has been confiscated by the Indian government, and the poor girl, is in hiding. Nobody knows where she is. Amazon India is trying to keep her protected, and they have kept her under wraps so she doesn't get captured and tortured to death or kind of disappeared like it generally happens in India if you fall foul to the Indian regime. So what happened was here in this case was Amazon committed a mistake of making a documentary which was called Tandav, Tandav. You can't actually find it now on Prime Video because they took it down under pressure. I think probably the best political documentary ever made in Indian history. I have watched it when it came out, but because it kind of highlighted political corruption and criminal elements, how they are being utilized by government to silence, and it was just a documentary, and that the Indian government flew up in rage, and they basically first arrested that lady, then they released her, but they confiscated her passport. I have forgotten the name of that lady. You can read this article. It's again a Washington Post article, and you can get all the details. What exactly happened to her, and she actually is right now as we talk. The poor lady, nobody knows where she is. Um, Same thing with Netflix. Netflix actually cancelled, and actually hired a guy who is probably the best director on political movies and drama today in India. His name is uh, Kashyap. I forgot his first name. His last name is Kashyap. This guy actually made one of the most highly paid political docu series, not docu series, political drama series for Netflix. It had a name. The whole shooting was everything was finished, and then the Indian government just didn't like it, and he was forced to Netflix was forced to shelve that political drama series. And that person, basically is still wondering, what happened to all my work of 3 years. And it is not just one series now. The culture of self censorship has set in. The players have learned a lesson that what they can do, what they can't do. Okay, Twitter. Again, an interesting story. Twitter office was raided as well. If you read the whistleblower report, I'll probably do a full thread on it. It is like mind blowing, like what all Indian tactics Indian government use. They basically threatened that Twitter India, that if they don't make two of their intelligence operatives sit in their office and give them access to data, then they're not going to just let them operate. So Twitter relented. So the two employees working for Indian Raw are actually embedded in the Twitter India office, and there is actually very damning kind of evidence in that whistleblower. If you read that whole report, it's not just two. Thereafter, multiple other hires were made, which were forced by the Indian government, basically forced Twitter India that you have to hire these employees. So none of your data, if you are on Twitter, take it guaranteed for me, your data is in Indian government's hand. It is not secure. Does not matter whether you're an American citizen, UK citizen, British citizen. Okay, all of us who work in technology companies, we know, how we engineers can access data, and how all this talk about this data is secure and all is fine when you are outside, but when you're you are inside and you are an engineer who has access to the databases, you get access to everything. It's very difficult to limit access. Uh, Okay, while I'm at, I'll just do a quick check with people who are on the video Twitter live stream. I hope my voice is clear there. If anyone does not hear my voice clear, because I'm also live streaming, let me know. I'm not on mute, so if can anybody give a thumbs up if my live stream is working fine, or people on live stream, can you post a comment? Okay, okay. Seems nobody is saying anything, so it's okay. Okay, so this is Twitter. I encourage everybody to read that whistleblower report. Google it, the whistleblower report on Twitter hearings in the Senate, and then you hear and just search for India and read the portion that is about India. Actually, when it came to talking about India, the the evidence was so damning that they had to go for a in-camera hearing for that portion, in whatever they call it, where only people with certain security clearance kind of go and brief. Because that was the level of interference that the Indian government was doing in the Twitter algorithms and Twitter structure itself. Okay. Uh, let's move on. So I talked about this, and there was another kind of report which came out. I have not shared it here, but I can talk about it. I think it was in Wall Street Journal or New York Times, I forget, wherein they showed that there are these big Twitter handles with millions of followers, who are actually, raw agent. Raw is the CIA equivalent of India, who are actually serving raw officers, who are basically running social media accounts with millions of followers and targeting, the Indian diaspora here, or religious minorities of India, or targeting, somebody else. And sometimes, though, some of them even are acting on behalf of Russia to kind of further that agenda. So that is again a very damning report. They actually figured out the some of these accounts and who were behind them. They named those serving officers. One of the guys' name is actually Lieutenant Colonel Satyath Satpathy something. You guys can find that article. I have not been able to paste it here, but a very very revealing article on how Indian intelligence officers are actually working as social media accounts and social media influencers, with millions of followers. Amazing. Uh, okay, yeah. So, well, before moving further, Sarwar Paji has made a comment that he has some reservations about my statement. I don't know which statement, Paji, but you can comment here if it is appropriate. Otherwise, when we open it up for questions and discussion, you're valid to kind of put it up. But if you're going to leave early, feel free to DM me or leave a comment here, and I'll address that. But if you're going to stay back through the end of this, then you're most welcome. I'll give you the speaker, and we'll talk about, in case I present or mispresented something, we'll open it up for a discussion so you guys can, everybody can weigh in. Okay, another thing that the Indian government has done is weaponizing its large diaspora population. And when I say diaspora, not the whole diaspora, but the Indian nationalistic diaspora. As you know, we talked about, India government has always been using blackmailing people in the diaspora by twisting their arms or by threatening, torture to their family members in India or their property, etc., etc. But that was just blackmail, and so you could do only that much. You could only create that many double agents. But Indian government has today found out a unique way, which nobody ever has done it. And what they have figured out is that, hey, we can actually brainwash our people who are going to US, either going or who are already there, into this Indian civilizational narrative and convert them into Indian nationalists, and then basically have their loyalties be more towards us than to American flag or Canadian flag. And then we can use them to do many things. Like they're Indians at every level, like in politics, in high technology, in you name it. The Indian diaspora is everywhere. Somewhere I was reading the Indian diaspora is 2% of roughly 2% of the American population. So you're talking about minimum 6 million people. Even if half of them become Indian nationalists, they can act as double agents for the government. So it's a very unique way they figured out. And that's why probably that whole digital army was created, to brainwash everybody into this idea of Indian nationalism, and then utilize them to buy influence within US, Canada, and other Five Eyes nations. And we'll show you some examples how powerful today the Indian government is, how much influence it holds within our political setup in US, in Canada, in Britain, In Australia, they can influence policy. They can influence our policy at every level. They can even influence, our policies internally as well as externally, even our foreign policy. And this is very different. This is very different from Chinese and Russians. Generally, you will get Chinese coming in here, Russians coming in here. They dislike the system back home, so they turn to be more like loyal to our flag. Same like Sikhs who come from India, they generally dislike the Indian system, so they become very loyal to the Indian flag. But the Indian diaspora, especially the Indian nationalistic diaspora, which has now been brainwashed into this ideology, is very unique, because they have come here, but their loyalty is towards India. So they'll openly tell you that if there's a conflict, where will you stand? They'll say India, not with US. And in fact, some of them probably deeply hate the idea of the Western civilization. So here's the prime example. Hopefully, this should have waken up our national security establishment. Uh, uh, Prime Minister Modi came to US, took Mr. Trump to a Howdy Modi event, filled up a stadium with 100,000 Indian Americans, waving Indian flags, some bit of American flags, mostly Indian flags, and telling them basically to Trump, I can help you win your next election. And he's true. It is true, because you look at the vote difference between the presidential candidates. It's, I think, not even, it's less than 500,000 between Hillary Clinton and Trump. Trump actually got 500,000 less votes than Hillary Clinton. Somebody should fact check me. My number could be here and there, but it's very close. It's not more than 1 million. Okay. And now you have Modi, who comes in and who tells you, hey, I have 3 million Indian nationalists who will vote wherever I will tell them to vote. Because Modi is so popular with the Indian nationalistic diaspora. So he could make anybody win the election in US. So if you can make that, you can choose who will be the president of US. Who has more power, the president of US or the guy who's choosing him? I hope this was a wake up call. When this happened, it was a wake up call for me. And when I saw this, what's going on out here? And anyways, this is not alone. The only way, even I'm told, this is happening in Senate. The senators are scared of saying anything which is against India. The congressmen are scared of saying anything which the Indian diaspora does not like, or saying anything against the Indian government, because they know that a big portion of their constituency, which is Indian nationalist diaspora, is very, very loyal to the Indian flag. So if they say anything against the Indian government, they're going to lose votes. So you can figure out, what's happening in the policy making of our country. This has not gone unnoticed. There is a full-fledged inquiry going on into foreign interference in Canadian politics. I think Canada is the bigger victim of this, because they're a smaller nation, less powerful, army, less power, less resources, way more vulnerable than us, and their politics has been, taken over left, right, and center by the Indian regime, because they have so much influence in who will win the election, straight from prime minister up to members of parliament. And this whole foreign interference committee, India's name is right on top as one of the major players of foreign interference. There was this global news article. You get, and there are articles after articles. I have given one just as an example, because then when you are kind of watching this again, you can just Google it and at least read this article, if not any other article. Canadian politicians were targets for Indian intelligence covert influence operations. So this is going on. Hopefully they will do something about it. Okay. What they are also, Indian government is also using its diaspora and the Indian nationalistic diaspora element who get into positions of power. One famous name is Chandra Arya. He's a member of Parliament of Canada. Use them to not only further the cause of Indian state, or by favorable policy towards Indian state, they are also using many of these politicians to drive divisions between Canadian society. And a prime example was Chandra Arya. This gentleman, if I can call him gentleman, he stood up in the House of Parliament, Canadian Parliament, and said the Sikh, all the Sikhs who are in Canada and demanding, and conducting this peaceful referendum for, or speaking up for human rights in India, they are basically snakes in our backyard. So just to give you an idea, how they are using all the influence that they have through the diaspora to cause problems within Canada. Another prominent way what there is happening, and it's very concerning, and I have given a report of what happened in New Zealand. The same thing happened in UK, maybe not in UK, in Canada, in US. This has happened. What has happened is somebody will come and suddenly deface the walls of the Hindu temples or mandirs and put graffiti there saying something anti-India and say okay, or something pro-Sikh, and then they will when the police will come to investigate, they will find, oh, the mandir will say, oh, we don't have any CCTV footage. None of these instances. There are probably three instances which happened in Australia, I think two or three which happened in Canada, and same two or three which happened uh, in US. In US recently, it happened in San Francisco, where in a mandir, Hindu mandir's wall and the board was kind of defaced with graffiti, and graffiti, kind of, it will be anti-India and pro-Sikh. So the insinuation being that the Sikhs basically did it. But the curious element is all of these mandirs had CCTVs, and not even a single incident did the mandir shared the CCTV footage. Because the incidents are most older in Australia, the Australian police got suspicious what's going on. So now we have, through the Freedom of Information Act, they finally released the police report, which did the investigation into the incidents in Australia. And basically, they said it was done by some Hindu extremist youth themselves. They came in connivance with the Mandar authorities. The CCTV footage was, or CCTV either turned off or whatever, and then basically they defaced the Mandar themselves so that the blame can be put on Sikhs. So now I'm naming Indian government in it. You'll say maybe this is done by somebody in an isolated fashion. But no, the Indian government gave up their hand, because the moment this happened, this defacement happened in Australia, the Prime Minister of India came to Australia, and he is on record publicly making a statement that Australian government is not safeguarding the Hindu Australians and is giving fillip to the Sikh Australians, and the Sikh Australians are targeting the Hindu Australians. So he basically saying, I am the Prime Minister of only of Hindu Indians. I am not the Prime Minister of Sikh Indians, who have come to your country. And so he kind of used that incident to put diplomatic pressure on Australia to clamp down on Sikh activism in Australia. So which kind of gave away the fact that there is probably Indian hand behind these instances. Uh, and then there's a very curious cases we have seen when I run Twitter Spaces. We have had Australian students of Indian origin kind of narrate cases to us on how they were blackmailed in Indian consulates and kind of pressurized to shut up and stop criticizing the Indian government. So this operation, I have given you this news report because this report got leaked. That report is available online. Bars News has done a great article where they have published the entire report, the police investigation report, and you guys can go and read it on Bars News if you have time. I probably have done a space on it as well, and you guys can listen to that space if you want more details. And then there is this. Okay, just hold on. Let me get this Puchanggi out. Okay, I'm sorry about that. The young man doesn't want to move out of my room, so he wants to be in camera. I'll let him be. Hopefully, he's not too much of a disturbance in the background. If he is, let me know. So this is a very very serious instance, because what Indian government is trying to do is trying to create this Hindu and Sikh fight, or at least an impression that the Hindus are being targeted by the Sikh diaspora in these foreign lands, and these governments have to do something. The end goal is to basically figure out a way so that the Australian government, the American government, and the Canadian government can, clamp down on the First Amendment rights of Sikh Americans or Sikh Australians, so that they can basically clamp down on their freedom of speech, so they don't speak up against the Indian government. So that is a very very dirty, I count it a tactic, a very low level tactic, but it is what it is. And okay, so I talked about defacement of mandirs across these three countries, multiple instances, probably more than 9 or 10 those instances. Those are not alone. We saw like Indian government enticing some communal riots within Canada. And the most famous of that is what happened on Westwood Mall. This is in Toronto, Canada. What happened was every year in Westwood Mall on Diwali is a joint festival between Sikhs and Hindus. And Sikhs and Hindus have a very, very great, social relationship. There's no animosity. These communities, if you go anywhere in world, you will see them living together. They will never be living segregated. Like generally, they will say the Hindus might have a problem with Muslims, but you will see Sikhs have no problem either with Muslim or Hindus. Maybe with Muslims to some extent, but not with the Hindus. So they have been living, and this festival is celebrated jointly. So every year in this mall, these young kids will get together, Hindus and Sikhs both, and they will burst firecrackers against the law because you can't burst firecrackers there. But it is a festival. Like the police also kind of looks the other way. The authorities kind of never stop them in a serious way. So they come and have a little bit of fun in this mall. But this year, and this has been happening for more than 5 to 6 decades, and a joint activity which was a sign of communal harmony. But this year, what happened was that when these guys were cracking, firecrackers or busting firecrackers, suddenly a car arrived with lot of aggressive Hindu youth who then came with their Indian flags and started waving the Indian flags in the face of the Sikh youth there. The Sikh youth obviously retaliated and they went into their cars and then they bought their Khalistan independence flag and they started waving back to them. And soon it turned into a ruckus and police had to intervene and separate the groups. But imagine like putting an Indian flag in the face of a Sikh in diaspora is equivalent to you taking a Nazi flag and putting in the face of a Jew. So that's the level of provocation here. That was being done. But but this was done first time. No Hindu will ever do it. Until and unless somebody has motivated a group of people, kind of paid them money and sent them there. That is why, at least in the Sikh community, there is consensus that this was not the local youth. These were new youth immigrants which have been pushed by the Indian government, and we'll go to there how Indian government has been pushing a lot of Indian nationalist immigrants through legal and illegal means into Canada and US to cause such trouble. And this was the first time a communal flare up happened between these two communities ever on Canadian soil. Okay, as I said, why this flare up is happening? Like if these diaspora communities were living peacefully for so long, what has suddenly changed? What has suddenly changed is in last 4 to 5 years, Indian regime has figured out that there is a easy way to push more national. You can weaponize the Indian diaspora, and they were not happy with the number of people already there. If you can push more Indian nationalistic diaspora, you can use them to do. You can get more votes. You get more influence within Canada and US, and then you also push in some criminal elements who can do a lot of work for you, who can do transnational terrorism, transnational repression, and we'll talk about some of the work that they have done. So on the Mexican border today, the highest number of ethnic groups who are crossing that border are actually Indians after Mexicans. You imagine where is India and where is the border? And how are they coming? There is a recent flight which was stopped in Romania. They are not coming as, somebody is paying an agent and coming alone. There are plane full of Indians which are taking off from Delhi, going directly and landing in Nicaragua. Every single passenger on that plane is going to get off and then cross the Mexican border. Every single passenger. So you can imagine that who is doing it. This is basically human trafficking at a scale being run by a country, like a big country, so-called democratic country, and its agencies on their own. It's not like an illegal operation. It's a full state is running a human trafficking operation. So there was this Lisa, and if you go and Google this flight which was taken down, I forced to land in France. This flight, again, what they're doing is the modus operandi is they will hire a chartered plane, the agency or Indian government from, these small Russian countries. Like, I think this was some Romanian plane, if I'm not wrong. And then they'll put, like, this plane had 303 Indians on it, all of them basically going to Nicaragua, because Nicaragua you can come with Indian passport, you don't need a visa. And then from Nicaragua they have this dangerous trek up to Mexican border, but all that is pre-arranged. All 303 of them were being trafficked. So can you imagine, this plane took off from Delhi, the national capital? And this is not the only plane. I just heard yesterday they took down another plane in Germany. Similar plane, similar case. So can such a plane with 300, every single passenger is being trafficked? Okay, can that take off without the knowledge of Indian law? I would say not the knowledge. It is basically their handiwork. And I can tell you personally a story. I was speaking to, like, I'm also ex-forces, and I was speaking to a friend of mine in the government, a couple of years back, because I was noticing that there is this sudden surge of, illegal Indians who are crossing the border. And I was talking to him, like, man, what's going on in India? Are things not good? Like, it seems like the economy is doing bad, because why are so many youth, risking their life crossing the border? And then he said, no, Harjeet, this is by design. We want them to go there. We want more and more Indian nationalists to actually enter US and Canada, because they become our asset. So that is the mindset that is driving the Indian state. Okay, great. The Again, like, one of the quote unquote benefits is, now you suddenly, one of the things that the Indian state has been doing is, and this I used to hear, in through anecdotal talk in the community, that, on the border, Harjeet, there are a lot of what you call gangsters who are being pumped in by the Indian government. I used to take it, okay, this probably is, people are seeing a lot of illegal Indians coming in, so they feel that a lot more gangsters are also come in. I used to take it lightly, but then the warnings were kind of obvious, and we started seeing it happening in Canada. In Canada, Surrey, BC is today infested with quote unquote Hindu nationalist gangs, Indian gangs who are kind of new kids on the block. What they have done is, there was always a gang culture in Surrey, but it was the Surrey gang culture wherein the youth who are born here would kind of grow. Some of them will grow into it. It was a gang culture which was kind of have almost become a part of the social structure there. You won't see them, doing mass scale public shootings, or doing extortion of every second businessman in the street. But these new gangsters now, which have come en masse, probably in these planes, they are now basically, and they basically write a letter. Last, I think, 2 weeks back, uh, there was an incident where, and we had people who came in here, and I think there's a TV news reporter which also confirmed, not a TV news reporter, a newspaper reporter, which actually collated, and he claimed more than 1,000 businesses in Surrey, BC received an extortion threat from Indian gangsters. And the letter was published. The letter is basically in broken English. Again, it'll all start with those Hindu salutations, Jai Shri Ram, we are here to extract money and blah, blah, blah. And the police advisory also came out. This is what came out from the Abbotsford police department. And, they basically even started naming that these are gangs based in India. They are targeting affluent members of South Asian community. They speak Hindi and they demand large quantities of money. We are told many people ended up paying money. Generally, they asked $2 million. People who did not pay money. We have shooting instances happening outside their houses. No killing has been reported till now, but multiple shootings have been reported. So this is what is happening in Surrey, this extortion thing. Same thing, and today this is the incident which prompted me to kind of do this space, because this is a very, very worrying incident, which is a very sad incident. What if, and this report came out in Edmonton CTV News, where they reported that there are these Indian gangs who have now come new to this town in Edmonton, Indian Hindu nationalist gang or Indian nationalist gang, whatever you call them. And what they are doing is they ask for money and extortion from people, and they're targeting different type of businesses, but to builders. Most of the builders in Edmonton are Sikh. So if you see in Canada, the Sikhs are big time in building and trucking. So what they'll do is they'll ask for money. If the money is paid, great. If the money is not paid, they'll go and put on fire whatever is their project or house that is being built. So you don't risk any life, but you basically do financial loss to a project which is already underway. So there are arson after arson in Edmonton that is going on right now. And very, very sad. Imagine, a business getting destroyed, a whole family getting destroyed because somebody just came from India and is motivated by the Indian government. And so that this is and what else is there? I've got okay. So I've tried to cover some elements of it. I've not covered the whole elements. There are other aspects, but to me, the Indian government, if you look at it all, the way they have pumped in these gangsters to do incite crime, do drug trafficking, to kind of do human trafficking of people, to buy political influence, do communal rights, to and to create basically influence within US and Canada. Um, how they and then how they have kind of manipulated and taken on the digital media. And the one aspect as to this now I'm reminded. So all this that Indian government did, okay, by blackmailing these companies, the way they did it was they said, if you don't follow what we are telling you to do, we will arrest your employees in India. And uh, and they did it legally, because they will pass some act in the parliament. The Indian constitution is not like US constitution. Okay, there's no bill of rights there. Then that you can, the government, like there, the constitution, the laws, there's the laws in India like UAPA, where an investigating officer can arrest anybody based on any suspicion he has that, okay, this guy might be of trouble, and you can be labeled a terrorist for 2 years. You are not to be produced in any court. And then the if he claims that you are a terrorist, okay, if he says you are a terrorist, he doesn't have to prove any evidence. The person who has been blamed that he's a terrorist has to prove to the court that he is not a terrorist. Okay, so the Indian law turns this whole legal thing of that you are innocent till proven guilty. It says you are guilty till you prove us that you are innocent. Okay, so it's a very unique country. I call it a bigger version of North Korea. North Korea may be also not that bad, but anyways. So that is under those laws, these companies are now forced to do all this kind of stuff and compromise the privacy of the users. But what has happened is, it is other authoritarian countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Iran. They see what's going on. So now they are also passing similar acts and similar laws and using the same tactics to basically blackmail these companies. So it has spread like cancer in the authoritarian world. And India is now they claim they are the leader of global South. I say they are the leader of all the authoritarian, regimes in the world today, in coming up with ingenious ways of, curtailing the freedom of people. So that is another, our whole digital media, our ecosystem is at risk from the actions of, a very irresponsible actions, I would say, of the Indian regime. Um, and then we know the death squads, the way some of the Americans are being killed on American soil. Canadians have been killed on Canadian soil, just because they're speaking up something that the Indian government does not like. So transnational terrorism, the constant multinational repression, and the overall role that India has played against US. I am convinced that India is actually on a India has an undeclared war going on against US and Canada. And why I say that, the crux of that goes to this last line. The why it has declared it is an undeclared or launched an undeclared war is because India sees US, Canada as competing civilizations that have to be destroyed. That is the mindset of their, they don't look at it as, some a civilization that they want to copy and they want to learn from and they want to kind of improve. But it is more like, okay, if you can read in their, in their public narrative, they will openly say, West is so bad, they took $45 trillion from us, that is why we are poor. And now we are here to basically get even. And there is this mindset that we have now arrived and we are going to get even with the West. And that the Indian civilization is this mythical, like the best culture and the best civilization in the world, and we are going to propagate that all through the world. It's no different than some of the people who have a very different view of Sharia based Islam, who want to kind of impose it on the entire world. So that is why I see that we invest are under attack from India, who is in cahoots with Russia and many other authoritarian regimes. So that is the crux of my presentation. We will open it up for for discussion. And I will invite people. They can ask me questions on, if you are watching me on the video stream, Twitter stream, you can put a question there. I can take the question from there. Or you can actually join as a speaker on the Twitter space. The Twitter space is open. Send me a speaker request. I'm happy to add you as a speaker and we can take questions. Let me add. Harman Chinnaji is saying good analysis. Thank you, Harmanji. I tried to put whatever I could find. It was a quick presentation I made in like 15 minutes. I didn't have enough time, but I wanted to. So I request people to ask for the mic, if you have a question, we can have a quick discussion. Especially, if there are people here who are sympathetic to the Indian nationalistic cause. I don't want to present a one-sided vision of this. And you are more than free to come and fact check me, if there is anything which has been presented incorrectly. Sarvaji, let me send you a speaker invite. I know you had a question. Sarvaji, if you can hear me, just accept that invite. And Coin Pan has not accepted for some reason. Chattapaji, you can hear me, right? Or is my voice not audible?
Yeah, ਮੇਰੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੋ ਵਾਰੀ ਫੋਨ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਇਸ ਵਿਚਾਲੇ। ਵੈਸੇ ਤਾਂ ਜਿੰਨੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤੂੰ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਮੇਰਾ ਕੋਈ ਬਣਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਵੀ ਬਾਹਰ ਉੱਪਰ ਦੀ ਕਰਾਂ, ਪਰ ਮੈਂ ਤੇਰੇ ਧਿਆਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਿਆਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਬਾਰਬਰਾ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਟੋਫਰ ਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਲੇਡੀ ਆ, ਉਹਨੇ 2010 ਚ ਆਰਟੀਕਲ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਸੀ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਐਲੀਫੈਂਟ ਇਨ ਦਾ ਰੂਮ। ਉਹ ਆਰਟੀਕਲ ਮੈਂ ਤੇਰੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਮੈਸੇਂਜਰ 'ਚ ਕਿਸੇ ਭੇਜ ਦਿੱਤਾ, ਤੂੰ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਲਈ ਉਹ। ਤੇ ਉਹ ਚਲੋ ਉਹਨੇ ਜੋ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਤੂੰ ਨਵੇਂ ਸਿਰਿਓਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਪਰ ਗੱਲ ਸਾਰੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਐਲੀਫੈਂਟ ਇਨ ਦਾ ਰੂਮ ਤੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਫਿੱਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਬੈਠਣ ਵਾਲਾ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਇੰਨੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗਾ, ਬਾਕੀ ਗੱਲ ਅੱਗੇ ਕਰੋ, ਫਿਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਆਪਾਂ।
Great. Yeah, I'll just say it in English. What Chattapaji was saying was that Barbara Crawford, she wrote an article in 2010 itself. The name of the article is Elephant in the Room, India, or India Elephant in the Room, kind of pointing out, how India is at cross purposes with the West and, might in the medium run turn out to be a hostile country rather than a friendly country. And we'll talk about those deep reasons as well before we close the topic, but I wanted to kind of give you a chance to Sarvar Paji is here. Sarvarji, you want to add something, question something, please feel free. The stage is yours.
Assalamu alaikum, Harjeet Bhai ji, Veer ji. Bada, I really enjoy, your vlogs, your talk, your information, and your research. मेरा ख्याल है पता नहीं ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਚਾਹਦੇ ਹੋ ਉਰਦੂ ਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏਗਾ, ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਕਰੀਏਗਾ, ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਕਰੀਏ।
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਰਦੂ ਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਚ ਕਰ ਲਓ, ਅਫਰੀਕਨ ਚ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਲਓ, ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ, ਉਰਦੂ ਚ ਨਹੀਂ।
ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚੰਗੀ ਲੱਗਦੀ ਹੈ, ਈਜ਼ੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਐਕਸਪ੍ਰੈਸ਼ਨ। ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਹੈ ਮੇਰੀ ਸਿਰਫ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਸੀ, ਅਰਜ਼ ਸੀ ਇੱਕ ਭਾਈ ਦੇ ਤੌਰ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ। ਦੇਖੋ ਸਾਡੀ ਬੜੀ ਟਾਈਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਜੋ ਮੇਰੇ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਆਈ ਵਾਜ਼ ਬੋਰਨ ਆਫਟਰ ਪਾਰਟੀਸ਼ਨ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਮੇਰੇ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਉੱਥੇ ਸਨ, ਮੇਰੇ ਅਬਾ ਅਜਦਾਦ ਵੱਡੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਸਾਰੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਸਨ, ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਸਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਨ ਵਗੈਰਾ। ਤੋ ਜੋ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬਹਿਣਾ ਉੱਠਣਾ, ਜੋ ਮਿਲਣਾ ਜੁਲਣਾ, ਔਰ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਬੜੀ ਰਿਸਪੈਕਟ, ਬੜੀ ਪਿਆਰ ਮੁਹੱਬਤ, ਬੜਾ। ਤੇ ਉਹ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ keeping that in view, and then ਅਗਰ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੁਣ ਲੇਟਰ ਸਟੇਜ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੇਖੋ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖੋ ਕਿ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਇਮਰਾਨ ਖਾਨ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਅਟਾਰੀ ਨੂੰ ਖੋਲਿਆ ਔਰ ਸਾਰਾ ਜੋ ਵੀ ਬੰਦੋਬਸਤ ਕੀਤਾ। ਕੋਈ ਆਸਾਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਮੁਹੱਬਤ ਹੈ, ਔਰ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਹੱਕ ਹੈਗਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਤੇ।
ਭਾਜੀ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਰੋਕਾਂਗਾ ਇਹਦੇ ਚ, ਸੌਰੀ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਟੋਕਿਆ। ਮੈਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ ਨੇ, we are not going to let you go off, we can go to the larger issue of the subcontinent, But if you can talk more about this topic, if you want to add anything, or that what this trans this kind of actions that Indian regime is taking within US and Canada today, and especially the ones that I've highlighted, what is your take on it? Or if something I said wrong, or if I missed something, or what is how do you see these actions, and what is kind of your if you I don't know where you are, but if you are in US and Canada, do these actions not worry you?
Yes, Harjeet ji, I'm in US. I'm in Texas for past 25 years or so, and I've heard and seen videos about the assassination that took place in Canada, and the G20 summit, and how Justin Trudeau you know uh, launched his protest and all that. It's we all, as a Muslim, I condemn it. I've seen in news that there was an assassination that took place in Lahore also, and we condemn that too. And then on a side note, whenever anything happens like that in United States, or wherever close to us, with the Sikh community, we are always looking after them, and we are always involved, and we always condemn it, because of course, I mean, terrorism cannot be appreciated at any level for any reason or any cause. So basically, I mean, it's we share the sentiments of our Sikh brethren throughout the world, wherever they are, and we appreciate their efforts to fight the Indian government in curbing oppression against them in India and outside India. And I mean, that's all I want to say. I just wanted to touch on one subject that जो सिख के हमारे जो वो थे, आपके गुरु थे जो, so he went to Makkah. I just wanted to bring that into discussion for just a couple of minutes. He visited Makkah and our holy places, Muslim holy places, showing us, and we love him for that. That he had a lot of respect for Muslims. So when he brought in the comparison of Hindu government with Muslim, that is where I think it does not make that comparison. I mean, I would not ask you to not say it or not express if you think it is right thing, but to me as a Muslim, not just trying to defend any Muslim for no reason, but I think it was it doesn't sit well with in that situation, especially given the fact that our ties are everlasting, and we have so much respect and love for each other as a community. So I'm just was just trying to touch the point that we should not touch the chords that are unnecessary. That's all I wanted to say.
Good. Yeah. So, no, it was not
we can discuss it later on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll do a separate space on that detail. The idea was not to kind of touch on any religious sensitivity.
Absolutely.
It was more political in nature. The comment was more political in nature, and we'll talk about that issue separately. But to come to this particular topic now, if there are no more questions, I'll try to kind of start wrapping up the things, okay? And kind of because you touched on something which is very critical, and that is actually it is a misconception I want to clear in the minds of listeners as well as anybody in the national security establishment who will end up listening to it. Many people make this mistake of seeing this as a India versus Sikh issue or a Sikh versus Hindu issue. It is not. It is not an issue of merely killing of some Sikhs or repression of some Sikhs. It is actually the Indian state taking a hostile view towards Canada and US per se. Today, Sikhs are in the middle of that, but tomorrow it could be somebody else. What is Indian government trying to do? Because it's not just trying to repress the voice of Sikhs, American Sikhs in here. It's saying you can't, if they anybody any American says anything against the Indian government, we are going to come and kill them. Until, or if you don't want us to come and kill them, hey Biden, you go and make them shut up. Or basically what he's telling the Biden is, you go and dilute your constitution, you go and dilute your bill of rights. We don't give a damn about it, but you have to do it because we don't like an American citizen exercising his First Amendment rights. So the implications of that are immense if we end up doing it. And it's not about Sikhs, as I say. It's just the Sikhs are kind of part of it today. Tomorrow it could be a Mexican. Tomorrow it could be a Chinese. Tomorrow it could be a Russian. This thing. Tomorrow it could be a white Caucasian American trying to talk about human rights in Congo or on in Africa. Everybody will again get a license to come and kill us just because we are saying something that a foreign government doesn't like. So are we going to then say, okay, if you have First Amendment rights till the time you talk about things in American system, but the moment you talk about things of a foreign government, your First Amendment rights are curtailed? So that is what Indian government is telling US and Canada to do. And they are not only doing that, they are not only forcing us in West to change the very foundations and values on which our constitution was built. Not only that, they are also doing other actions like propping up BRICS, challenging the dollar's supremacy across the world. So I've kind of listed them out here. You have to see the whole picture. Funding our enemies, doing nuclear proliferation, being in cahoots with Russia, helping Russia fight all the war against US and the West. So these are actions of a friendly nation. These are actions of an active hostile country. So even if they don't do anything about killing Sikhs here, just merely these actions tell you where the Indian state stands with respect to how they view the West. And as I had given you the deeper context. The current Indian regime sees India as a civilizational state, a Hindu civilizational state, which is going to one day take over the Christian civilization and the Islamic civilization and all. And you guys can go and watch the topmost Indian strategic analysts openly talking about this conflict. That is deeply rooted in their mindset. And it is that mindset which is driving all these actions. And it is high time that our national security establishment understands that deeper mindset, that deeper cultural, nationalistic narrative which is driving these actions. Because only if we understand the root cause can we take appropriate measures. If we just see it as Indians targeting Sikhs, we will end up making a lot of wrong decisions, or we'll end up finding wrong solutions which will not solve the problem here. The Sikhs are not threatened. The Sikhs have been in conflict with the Indian government, any Indian government actually, from the day that religion was set in place, and they have survived. Every year they become stronger. They will keep surviving. The issue is, as Americans today, our freedoms are under threat by a third world authoritarian regime. And so, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to shut up? Are we going to take it, or are we going to put them in place where they belong? So, with that thought, I think I'll give a last call. If anybody has a question, they want to contribute, ask a question, you're more than welcome. Else, we will close this space. So I'm looking for speaker requests. Speaker request 1, speaker request 2, speaker request 3. Okay. No speaker request. Great. I think we did a nice recording. Hopefully many people will watch it. I urge you guys to share whenever the recording comes online, especially the video recording. The stream, please share, repost it so it can reach maximum fellow patriots across our Western civilization. They can read it and they can understand what's going on with India. Because, we, the Indian diaspora community who are patriotic to the American flag, to the Canadian flag, and we are the ones who are in a unique position to really notice this danger way earlier than even our larger society, larger setup here will see it. So it is our duty as patriotic Americans, as patriotic British citizens or Canadians to kind of, highlight this problem appropriately, forewarn our national security establishment that, hey, we need to kind of really take this seriously. We have potentially 2 to 3 million Indian nationalistically brainwashed agents roaming around. What do we do about them? Like like if they are openly loyal to Indian flag versus American flag, what risks we carry in that scenario. So I think everybody's intelligent enough to understand the risk. Okay, I would like to thank everybody. We will close this as I always do with a Sikh prayer for the welfare of everybody. ਨਾਨਕ ਨਾਮ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਤੇਰੇ ਭਾਣੇ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਦਾ ਭਲਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਤੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।